The padlock on the door of Delgado's Boxing Club on South Hooper Avenue in Los Angeles had not been opened in 5 years, 2 months, and 11 days when a man in a dark jacket and worn jeans crouched in front of it one Thursday morning in November, studied it for a moment, and then sat down on the front step to wait. Not because he had a key, not because he had called ahead, not because anyone was expecting him. He waited 47 minutes. When the door finally opened from the inside, the man who had locked it was standing there in a gray undershirt and looked as though he had not slept the night before, or possibly several nights before that. He stared at the man on the step. The man on the step looked up. "I heard about this place," he said. "I was hoping you might show me around." What happened in the next 3 hours changed two lives, and quietly over the years that followed, changed a great many more. There is a gym on South Hooper Avenue in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles called Delgado's Boxing Club. Or there was, depending on when you are reading this. A cinder block building, painted a deep red that had faded to the color of old brick in the years before anyone stopped noticing. The sign above the door was hand-lettered in black paint. Delgado's Boxing Club, Est, 1987. By a man who had learned his lettering from a sign painter on Compton Avenue and had practiced it on newspaper for 2 weeks before he touched the wall. Inside, 3 full-size rings, heavy bags along the east wall, 12 of them, the leather on the older ones, gone soft as worn-out shoe leather from the accumulated work of 23 years. Speed bags on timber frames that the owner had built himself from Douglas fir, a pull-up bar bolted between 2 load-bearing columns. A concrete floor with tape marks worn smooth by the feet of 10,000 rounds of sparring. The smell of canvas and sweat and the particular sweetness of rubbing liniment that does not leave a place even when nothing else remains. The gym had operated 6 days a week, 50 weeks a year from 1987 to 2019, free for kids under 16, $4 a session for adults. And the owner had never once collected the $4 from anyone he suspected could not afford it. At its peak, in the middle years, Delgado's had produced 3 state Golden Gloves champions, 1 nationally ranked amateur, and more young men who had simply needed somewhere to go after school than anyone had thought to count. The neighborhood knew the gym the way it knew the church 2 blocks north, and the barber shop on the corner, as one of the things that meant the street was still alive. Then, in the first week of March 2019, the owner locked the door from the inside, walked out the back, and did not come back. The sign stayed. The padlock went on. The red paint kept fading. Hooper Avenue went on without it, the way streets always do. Ruben Delgado was 61 years old when he locked the gym. He was a large man, still carrying the breadth of the middleweight, who had gone 17-3 as an amateur in the 1980s. Though the muscle had softened at the edges in the way of a man who has spent 30 years teaching the sport rather than competing in it, his hands were the thing you noticed first. The knuckles enlarged from years of the bag, the right index finger permanently angled from a break that had not been set correctly in 1986. He wore those hands openly, the way a craftsman wears the evidence of his work. A had grown up 4 blocks from the gym on a street that was harder then than it is now. His father had driven a delivery truck for a produce wholesaler in the Arts District and had worked Saturdays when work was available. His mother had managed the budget for a family of 5 with the precision and discipline of someone for whom the margin between enough and not enough was never abstract. Boxing had been Ruben's way out of one kind of life and into another. Not out of the neighborhood. He had never wanted to leave the neighborhood, but out of the particular current of the street that pulls at teenage boys with the same indifference as a riptide. His trainer, an older man named Curtis Wills, who had run a gym in Inglewood since the 1970s, had told him at 14, "The gym is the deal you make with yourself. You show up, it shows up. You don't, it doesn't. Nothing complicated about it." Ruben had held that sentence like a compass for 47 years. He had opened Delgado's at 34, with $11,000 saved from 6 years of training other people's kids, and 1 small business loan from a credit union on Vermont Avenue. He had done most of the interior work himself, the timber frames, the tape lines on the floor, the hand-lettered sign. The first year, he had 11 regular members. By the 5th, he had 63. He had a son named Marco. Marco had started training at the gym when he was 8 years old, on a Saturday morning in 1998. following his father through the back door in a pair of sneakers, 2 sizes too large, too proud to say they were his older cousins. He had been in the gym almost every day after that. It had a gift for the sport. Not a special gift, not the kind that produces champions, but the real gift that matters more. The willingness to do the same thing badly and then slightly less badly for years without needing to be told it was worth it. E had gone 12-1 as a junior amateur. He had coached a youth class on Tuesday and Thursday evenings while he was in community college. Marco Delgado had died in February 2019. A car accident on the 105 freeway, a February morning. Wet roads. He was 29 years old. Ruben had locked the gym 18 days later. He had not been able to explain it, and no one had asked him to. The people in the neighborhood understood what the gym had been to Ruben and what Ruben had been to the gym. The closure was a grief made physical, a man shutting the door on the room where his son had become himself. The padlock went on. 5 years passed. Ruben was still living 4 blocks away in the same house he had lived in since 1993. He did not go near the gym. Ed did not avoid it either. He walked past it sometimes to the market on the far side of it, and he looked at the sign and kept walking. His neighbor, a woman named Gloria Reyes, who had known Ruben since before the gym opened and who brought him food on a schedule she had organized, entirely without being asked, told people that he was fine. She said this in the tone of a person who knew the difference between fine and all right and was choosing which word to use carefully. It had given some thought in the past year to selling the building. A property management company had sent letters twice. It had not replied. It had not been able to decide whether not replying was a decision or a postponement of one, and he found the uncertainty easier to live with than either answer. It was sitting at his kitchen table on a Wednesday evening when a man named Dennis Park, who ran a youth outreach organization out of a church on 103rd Street and who had known Ruben casually for 12 years, called to say that he had heard from someone who had heard from someone that there was a person interested in the gym, not in buying it, in seeing it. Dennis sighed. He asked me if I thought you'd be willing to talk. I told him I'd ask. Ruben said, "Who is it?" Dennis told him. There was a long silence on the phone. Ruben said, "Why?" Dennis said, "That's a good question. I think you should ask him yourself." The dark jacket and the worn jeans were already on the front step when Ruben came down South Hooper Avenue the next morning. He had told Dennis 7:30. The man on the step had been there since 6:43. Ruben stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at him. The man stood up. He was taller than Ruben had expected. He put out his hand. "Thank you for coming," he said. Not "thanks for seeing me." Not "I appreciate your time." Thank you for coming. As though the act of showing up to your own building required acknowledgement. Ruben shook his hand. He stood in front of the padlock for a moment. He had not touched it in 5 years. He had thought, sometimes, that it might feel like something. Ceremony or resistance, or nothing at all. It felt like a key in a lock. He turned it. The shackle swung open. He pushed the door. The gym smelled the way he had known it would smell. Canvas and time, and the ghost of liniment that does not leave. The light from the door fell across the concrete floor. The heavy bags on the east wall were still. The ring still stood. The canvas yellowed. The ropes gone slack, but still standing. The pull-up bar between the columns. The tape lines on the floor, worn but visible. Ruben had not looked at any of this in 5 years. He stood in the doorway. The man beside him did not say anything. He did not fill the silence with words about what the place must mean or how impressive it was, or any of the things people say when they are trying to manage a moment they do not know how to be. Inside, he just looked, the way a person looks at something when they are actually looking. After a while, he said, "Can I walk around?" Ruben said yes. The man walked the room slowly. He stopped at the heavy bags. He put his hand on one of the older ones, the leather soft from decades of work, and held it for a moment. He walked to the nearest ring and rested his arms on the ropes and looked across the canvas. He tilted his head at something in the far corner. He walked over. In the far corner, beside the last speed bag frame, there was a photograph in a simple wooden frame, a teenage boy in headgear, gloves raised, in the left-hand ring, gout in mid-combination, weight on his front foot, chin tucked. The photograph was slightly dusty. The man looked at it for a long time. "Your son?" "Yes." How old is he there? 16. It was quiet. He looks like he knows exactly what he's doing. He always did, Ruben said. Took him 3 years to get there, but once he got there, he was settled. They stood in the corner for a moment. Neither of them moved. Then the man said, "Would you be willing to sit down for a bit? I have some things I'd like to ask you." Ruben found two folding chairs behind the equipment cage, the same chairs that had lived in that spot since 1994, and set them up in the middle of the floor. They sat. The man asked about the gym, not with the questions of someone performing interest, but with the specific questions of someone who wanted to understand how a thing actually worked. How many kids at the peak? What the youth program looked like practically? Who came? What time? What the sessions ran? Whether it was affiliated with USA Boxing or independent. Whether there had been paid coaches or volunteers, or both. What the operating budget had looked like in a strong year. Ruben answered. He had not talked about the gym in 5 years. The answers were still there. The man listened, the way people rarely listen, not waiting for his turn to speak, not assembling the next question while the current answer was still in the air, just receiving it. After a while, Ruben stopped answering and said, "Why do you want to know all this?" The man said, "Because I think this gym should be open, and I wanted to understand what opening it would actually require before I said that out loud." Ruben looked at him. "It's my son's gym," Ruben said, not as a refusal, as information he needed the other person to have. "I know," the man said. "I closed it because I couldn't." He stopped. "I know," the man said again. "I'm not asking you to reopen it because it would be a good thing for the neighborhood, even though it would. I'm asking because I think the version of this place that Marco knew, the place that was worth showing up to every day for 20 years, I think that place still exists. You think it's sitting in here right now. And I think you know that too, or you wouldn't have kept the padlock instead of selling the building." The gym was very quiet. Outside, a truck went past on Hooper. A dog somewhere briefly. "I haven't been able to go back," Ruben said. "I know that too. I don't know if I can coach those kids and not see him every time I look at the ring." The man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I lost someone years ago. Someone I wasn't prepared to lose. For a long time, I thought the answer was to put distance between myself and everything that reminded me of them. What I found out, and I am not saying this is true for you, I'm only saying it was true for me, is that the distance didn't make the grief smaller. It just made the life smaller." "And let that sit. What if seeing him in the ring every time you looked wasn't the problem?" he said. "What if it was the closest thing you still had to him being here?" Ruben did not say anything for a long time. He looked at the ring, the yellowed canvas, the slack ropes, the tape lines on the floor worn to a shimmer. He sighed. "Marco used to say the gym was the only place where nothing was pretending to be something else. That sounds like someone who understood something real." He was 29 years old. Yes. They sat in the folding chairs in the middle of the floor for a while after that, not talking. The light from the open door moved across the concrete as the morning shifted. Eventually the man said, "I'd like to help you open this back up. Not run it. That's yours. But the equipment needs work. The canvas needs replacing. The building needs some attention. I know some people who know how to do those things, and I'd like to provide what it takes to operate without having to charge the kids $4. Ruben said, "Marco's the one who taught the youth class." "I know. I don't know who does that now." "You find out," the man said. "The neighborhood has been waiting 5 years. There are kids on this street right now who don't know this place exists. Somebody needs to tell them." He stood up from the folding chair. "The decision is yours," he said. "All of it. I'm not here to tell you what Marco would have wanted. I didn't know him. You did. But I think you already know the answer, or you would have sold the building 2 years ago when the letters came." He put out his hand. Ruben shook it. The man walked to the door. He paused at the frame and looked back once. At the rings, the heavy bags, the photograph in the corner. Then he walked out into the November morning. Ruben sat in the folding chair for a long time after he left. It was still sitting there when Gloria Reyes walked past the building 2 hours later and saw the door open for the first time in 5 years. She stopped on the sidewalk. She looked at the open door for a moment. Then she walked to the market to get what she had been going to get, because she understood that whatever was happening inside was not something that needed an audience yet. She brought soup back on her way home. Ruben did not reopen the gym the next week. He reopened it 112 days later, on a Tuesday in March, which was not a coincidence and was not discussed. The equipment work had taken 6 weeks. New canvas on all 3 rings, the leather on 4 of the heavy bags replaced, the other 8 he cleaned and conditioned himself. Working on them over 3 Saturdays, and anyone paying attention would have known this was not about saving money. The speed bag frames were releveled and the boards refinished. The concrete floor was cleaned and the tape lines relaid, exactly where they had been, measured from the marks still visible underneath. The hand-lettered sign above the door was touched up, not replaced, touched up, using the same black paint over the original letters. The sign painter's work was still legible underneath. Ruben stayed inside the lines. The photograph in the corner was moved to the wall beside the door, where it would be the first thing you saw when you came in, and the last thing you saw when you left. He found a better frame for it, rail wood, properly mitred, at a frame shop on Manchester Avenue. He put Marco's name under it, on a strip of card in the same lettering as the sign. His name, his years, and one line beneath. He knew what the gym was for. The youth program was rebuilt over the first 3 months. Ruben coached Tuesday and Thursday evenings himself. On Saturday mornings, he was joined by a man named Calvin Osei, who had boxed at Delgado's as a teenager in the early 2000s and had become a high school PE teacher in Inglewood, and who had heard through Denny's Park that the gym was coming back, and had shown up one Saturday in February with a coffee and the flat statement that he had been waiting for someone to call him. Nobody had called him. He had come anyway. By the end of the first year, there were 41 youth members, 14 adults on the regular evening schedule, a waiting list for Saturday morning beginners, which Ruben had not expected and for which he added a second session without discussion. He did not charge the kids. He charged the adults $8 a session, which he had thought about for a long time. He had charged $4 for 30 years. Doubling it felt like a change that needed to mean something. He gave the difference, $4 per adult session, across the week, to a fund he set up in Marco's name through Dennis Park's organization. The fund covered equipment for kids who needed it and boost fare for kids who had to travel to get to the gym. By the end of the second year, the fund had disbursed $4,380. The property management company did not send another letter. Calvin Osei had been 16 the summer he trained at Delgado's. He had walked in because his older brother had told him it was better than the street, which had not sounded like a compliment at the time, but which Calvin understood now as exactly what it was. He had trained for 3 years and gone 4-2 as a junior amateur, and then left for college, and left boxing behind, and spent 20 years in high school gymnasiums teaching other people's kids how their bodies worked. He had never stopped thinking about the gym on South Hooper Avenue. When he came back that Saturday in February with the coffee, Ruben had looked at him for a moment and then said, "I remember you." Calvin had said, "I remember you too." That had been enough. In his third year back at the gym, Calvin started a mentorship program, pairing older members, adults who had been training for at least a year, with younger kids who were in their first 6 months. No technical coaching, just presence. Just the fact of an adult who showed up consistently in the same place for the same reason and could be asked questions that weren't about boxing at all. It called it the Curtis Wills Program, after the name Ruben had mentioned once, almost in passing. The man from Inglewood, who had trained Ruben at 14 and told him the gym was the deal you make with yourself. Ruben heard the name when Calvin told him and did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Curtis would have hated having something named after him." Calvin said, "That's why I did it." Ruben laughed. It was the first time Calvin had heard him laugh, and he had been at the gym almost every Saturday for 8 months. It was a good sound. The man in the dark jacket did not visit the gym after it reopened. He had said the decision was Ruben's, and he had meant it in both directions, the opening and everything that came after. Ruben knew through Denny's that he received updates. He suspected this was true without needing to confirm it. On the 1-year anniversary of the reopening, Ruben put a card in an envelope and left it with Dennis to pass along. He was not a person who wrote notes easily, and what he wrote was short. He'd said, "You ask me what Marco would have wanted. I've been thinking about that for a year. I think he would have wanted the tape lines to stay where they were. I kept them where they were. I think he would have understood that as an answer. He did not sign it with his name. Dennis knew whose it was. 5 years after the reopening, 10 years after the day Ruben had walked out the back and locked the door, a 17-year-old named Isaiah Torres from 2 blocks north won his first state junior Golden Gloves title. He had started training at Delgado's at 12, walking in on a Tuesday evening because a kid at his school had told him it was free for under 16s and he had nothing else to do that afternoon. Ruben had been at the door when he came in. He had shown him where to leave his bag and pointed him towards the warm-up line, and that had been the beginning of it. Isaiah, afterward in the parking lot outside the arena in Sacramento with the trophy still in his hands, was asked by a reporter from a local sports blog who had trained him. Esaid Ruben Delgado. It runs a gym in Watts. He trained me from the start. The reporter asked what was special about the gym. Isaiah thought about it. It's the realest place I know, he said. Nothing in there is pretending to be something it isn't. He kept coming back to the folding chairs, not the renovation, not the youth program, not Isaiah Torres in Sacramento, the folding chairs in the middle of the floor, and 2 people sitting in them, and one of them saying something that was not advice and not comfort and not a plan. What if the distance didn't make the grief smaller? It just made the life smaller. I think about that sentence in contexts that have nothing to do with a boxing gym. I think about the doors people lock and keep paying the property tax on, because selling feels more final than silence. I think about the rooms people stop going into, the phone calls they stop making, the version of themselves they put in storage, because the version that loved a specific person can't exist at full size anymore without that person in it. I do not know what the right answer is for any of that. I am not sure there is one answer. What I know is that a man sat in a folding chair in a dark room and said something true to another man who needed to hear it. And then he left. He did not stay to see what happened. It trusted Ruben to know what to do with it. That, to me, is the thing. This story is fictional, inspired by Keanu Reeves' well-known reputation for quiet generosity, for showing up without announcement, and for treating people as though they already have everything they need. Drop a comment and tell me what this one brought up for you. I mean that. I read them. Share it with someone who might need it today. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next one. See you in the next one.